This link is for 5th grade, going along with part 2 of Skunk Scout. If you go ahead and make sure you're on page 682 and 683 in your Treasures textbook, this is where we left off before in part 1. Bobby and I jumped back. "What's wrong?" my brother asked. "It's just the dry ice," I laughed. I was enjoying my moment of triumph. Uncle Curtis fanned his hand over the chest to help blow away some of the fog. "Boy, Teddy, I know this is one batch of meat that's not going to spoil." White ribbons crept out of the chest and down the sides, while Uncle Curtis carefully lifted out a big parcel wrapped in pink butcher paper. He lost his grin, though. "It's like a glacier." I poked at the package in his hands. It was cold enough to make my body and hands ache. Through the paper I traced the shape of hot dogs, and they feel like rocks. Uncle Curtis lifted out another package and hefted it over his shoulder like a shot put. The hamburgers like a lump of coal, too. I wasn't going to let this ruin my achievement. "Let's see them out," I urged. Part of these packages we'll thaw out when we can have that." So Uncle Curtis placed both packages out on a rock. "You boys have to get some firewood anyways. Just pick up the dead wood lying around. We're not allowed to chop any trees." "Right away," Bobby said, heading out. "Wait for me, oh fearless leader," I muttered and wandered off after Bobby. "Just how much wood do you need to cook food anyways?" I asked the researcher. "I don't think we can carry back a log." "Now the book didn't say," Bobby said, "but on television they always seem to use the wood about this thick," and he held up his fingers apart about 6 inches. "In the movie, there's always dead, but all we could gather up were twigs." "Let's stop there. Seems like a good place in the story to stop and see if I understand everything that is taking place. After this page, I can ask myself questions and make some inferences about what's going on between Bobby and Teddy. For example, why does he say he's enjoying this moment of triumph after Bobby is scared by all the fog? I think it may be because Teddy used dry ice to pack food. That would make sense. And then Teddy refers to Bobby as a fur and the researcher. Tell me what questions you might understand what Teddy means when he refers to Bobby this way. Let's see. Now, before Teddy called Bobby the researcher, he asked him how much wood they need to cook food. I think it's clear that Teddy resents Bobby, but why does he call him the researcher? Maybe because Bobby was more excited about the trip than Teddy was. Now, I know when I'm interested in something, I try to find books on the subject. So Bobby may have read about camping before he and Teddy went on their trip with Uncle Curtis. Disgusted, I looked at the handful I had. This isn't even enough for a broom. Bobby held up his own. The other campers must have picked the mountain clean. When we returned, Uncle Curtis stared at the handful of twigs. "That's okay for kindling, but where are the branches?" "This is all we could find," I confessed helplessly. Uncle Curtis rubbed the back of his neck. "I was counting on using firewood." I saw a column of smoke rising the short distance away. "Maybe someone has spare firewood. I'll borrow some. Nature lovers always share with one another. It's the code of camping," Uncle Curtis said. Suddenly he slapped himself. "Oh, darn mosquitoes!" Apparently there had been creatures besides humans having a meal. "I guess it's time to use my birthday gift," I said. I went back to the tent. Something rustled in the brush nearby, but the bushes were too small for a bear to hide behind, so I went inside and got the mosquito repellent. I can't say it was much good. Even as I sprayed my arm, a mosquito flew right through the mist up to land on it. "This stuff just makes it tastier for mosquitoes," I said. I was hot, sweaty, being eaten alive and hungry. So hungry that even Spam would have tasted good. I poked each package with disappointment. They're still like ice. Bobby turned the package over on a rock. They had clonked against the stone. Darn dry ice! Frustrated, he picked up the package and dropped it against the rock. It landed with a loud crack. I thought there was a 50-50 chance that either the rock or the meat had broken. Uncle Curtis grabbed a package under either arm. "Well, defrost the meat as we cook it. What's the menu for today, boys? Hot dogs or hamburgers?" I'm going to go ahead and stop right there real quick. Now, do you think it's appropriate for Uncle Curtis to borrow firewood from another camper nearby? Do you think it's appropriate? So the action would be that Uncle Curtis says nature lovers always share with one another, and that this is a code of camping. Do you think it's appropriate or not appropriate? Well, people should help each other no matter where they are. Now, it's appropriate for Uncle Curtis to ask another camper for help because they're in the middle of the woods. So asking for help would be a wise decision. So it would be appropriate. So with that being said, we could say people should help each other no matter where they are. It is appropriate for Uncle Curtis to ask other campers for help. Okay? With that being said, let's continue to read. Now Bobby punched cheerfully in the air. Hot dogs! I guess the dry ice hasn't been such a good idea after all. Sulking, I jammed my hands in my pocket. I'll settle for anything that isn't part of the polar ice cap. Uncle Curtis put the hamburgers into the chest and snapped the clasp shut. You boys bring the buns and mess kit. I'll bring the hot dogs. Now the cooking area was an open space. A row of stoves had been built from stones and metal grills. Now Uncle Curtis went over to the table where some campers were eating. He came back with a half bag of charcoal. $10 for this, he complained. Fellow lovers of nature, my eye. Well, maybe it's the membership fee for the club, I said. Uncle Curtis shot me a dirty look as he poured charcoal from the bag into the pit beneath the metal grill. Without lighter fluid, it took a little while and a lot of fanning and blowing before the coals caught. As the coals slowly turned red, we began to set our stuff out on a nearby picnic table. The previous cooks had not bothered to clean the grill, and Uncle Curtis, though he had brought a spatula, he used it to scrape the metal bars. In the meantime, we unwrapped the paper. The hot dogs were fused together into a lump the size of a football. No matter how hard we tried, we could not break them apart. Wait! Bobby proudly opened his borrowed mess kit and took out a fork. When he tried to pry a hot dog off, the tines bent. We still hadn't freed any hot dog by the time the coals were ready. By now, Uncle Curtis was too impatient to be careful. Lifting the mass of hot dogs, he set the whole fuse lump in the grill. I'll pry them off as they defrost. Water began dripping into the coals in loud hisses. As steam rose around the hot dogs, Uncle Curtis straightened the tines of the fork. Carefully, he worked at one of the hot dogs. Almost, he muttered, and with a plop, the hot dog fell through the grill onto the coals. In no time, it was black as a stick of charcoal, and by the time this had happened to 3 more hot dogs, I tried to use a stick to ease them out of the coals. Now Uncle Curtis shoved me back. They're dirty! I don't care, I admitted. I'm hungry. And they're half raw, too. So he threw them in the trash can. Now, with that being said, was Uncle Curtis right to throw the hot dogs away? Was he in his right to throw those hot dogs away? So let's talk about the action here. So it is usually not a good idea to eat raw meat. Also, okay, so you got to think about that. And also, the previous cooks had not bothered to clean the grill. Okay, and with that being said, the hot dogs probably weren't the best, but especially when they fell in that charcoal and only half cooked, was it an appropriate thing for Uncle Curtis to throw away those hot dogs? Absolutely, it was appropriate for Uncle Curtis to throw away the hot dogs. Okay, with that being said, let's go ahead and continue to read. Now, we were still trying to defrost the hot dogs after the other campers had left. What wasn't burnt in charcoal was like a popsicle. We could get worms from eating raw meat, Uncle Curtis sighed. And then, what would your grandmother say? We'll eat marshmallows instead. So we took the meat circles back with us, expected them to be defrosted by dinner time. We can put the marshmallows on the stick you brought back, Uncle Curtis said, and then we can heat them over the coals. That cheered me up a little. No meal can be too bad if it's mostly sugar. They should be in a paper sack, Teddy, Uncle Curtis said, as he pulled the hot dogs back onto the rock. As I went to the tent, I saw its sides moving. Now I figured it was just the wind, but when I raised the flap of the tent, a gray furry bundle waddled out. It was about the size of a watermelon, but covered all over with gray fur. On its face it was a black mask. From television, I knew it was a raccoon. Calmly, it licked its sticky paws. His toes looked a lot like little fingers. "Aren't you supposed to be scared of me?" I asked him. Animals always were, on the nature shows. I thought I saw him shrug, and then he cleaned the other paw. "Well, I'm bigger than you," I pointed to him. "That should count for something." And with a sniff, he rolled away back to the brush. I watched him disappear, and then, curious, I raised the flap of the tent. Inside, it was a mess, even worse than my part of the bedroom at home. The sleeping bags had been tumbled about. Worse, the paper bag had been torn open, and suddenly I understood why the raccoon was licking his paws. The plastic sack with the marshmallows had been split apart. Only a few marshmallows left. They lay scattered in the dirt, and I whirled around. The brush was still shaking in the distance. "You rotten little pig! I hope you get cavities," I yelled. And that goes ahead and concludes this link in this story. Of course, if you have further questions or concerns about making judgment, please do not hesitate to contact me, either email, phone call, Learning Center, or office hours.